My opponent starts with the move d4, and I'll respond with kf6. I wanted to play d5, but why not? Kf6, he plays c4. And now I'm hesitating. There are several possible moves, but I'll play the pawn to e6 to free the bishop on f8. And maybe come to give a check on b4. He plays g3. I'll come to give a check on b4. It's not really dangerous for him. He can block with his pieces. In fact, he blocks with the bishop. I'll play the queen to e7 like this. If he takes, I'll recapture with the queen and attack the king and the pawn on b2. But he doesn't take and plays knight to f3. And now I castle. In my opinion, he's going to play bishop to g2 and look to castle as well. Now I exchange the bishops on the dark squares. And you see, we both have bishops on the light squares. So I need to set up a pawn structure on the dark square, because if I set up a pawn structure on the white square, for example, with c6 and d5, I'm going to trap my bishop. So instead, I'm going to play d6 and e5. You see, always try to build a pawn structure on the color opposite to your bishop. That way you have good control over the colors, and you don't trap your bishop. And the push to e5. If he takes, I can recapture with the pawn. So I'm less well developed than he is, because I have my 3 pieces on the queen side that haven't moved yet. So he plays the pawn to e4. Now look at what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to win the pawn, because if I take on d4, the knight recaptures, and the bishop will defend the pawn on e4. So I won't be able to go and win it. But here I'm going to play bishop g4, pin his knight on f3, and try to take control of the d4 square, then with knight c6. So try to exchange the light squared bishop for the knight to dominate the dark squares. On the centralized square d4, if he plays, for example, h3, I take, and then knight c6 to attack d4. Now I also threaten to capture on d4, since the knight on f3 is pinned. So he plays d5. Now the pawn structure is starting to close up. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try to direct my knight towards the square c5, for example, with knight d7 or knight a6. On c5, it will be able to double the attacks on the pawn on 4. The problem is that the opponent could play b4 to push back my knight. So I'll first play a5 to try to secure the square c5. If he plays a3, I play f4. That way, in square of b4, I could do the en passant. So my intention is to put my knight from b8 to c5. For now, it's a game of positioning. So I'll still need to figure out how to use the freeing levers. There are 2, mainly the c6 push or the f5 push. I don't know which one I'll go for yet. What I want is to position my knight. And my opponent, for the first time in the game, is actually thinking quite a bit. He plays a3, and so I play a4. The rook defends the pawn, and the idea now is to play king d7 and king c5. Not really king d6, because he could take the pawn on a4, but king to d7, then king to c5. And so, as I said, in square of b4, I do the en passant and plays queen c2. And so here he has undeveloped his knight to f3. His knight on f3 could very well play knight to e1 and knight to d3 to contest the e5 square. I'm going to exchange the light squared bishop for the knight. I don't know if that's a good idea, maybe not. But this way I create an imbalance with 2 knights against a knight and a light square bishop. And since he has stacked his pawns on the light squares, his light square bishop won't have much play. At least I hope so. And you see, with his knight on f3, he could have played knight e1 and knight d3 to contest the coming of my knight on c5. Now it's more difficult for him to control this black square. He plays b4, so en passant. And now he's going to recapture with the knight to contest the c5 square. There, that's what he's doing. So I'm still considering playing knight c5. And if knight takes, I recapture with the pawn. And I free up the d6 square for my knight, knight e8, knight d6. Look at the knight maneuvers, it's interesting. We can play like that. Otherwise, I can just play simply b6. But he's going to try to play a4 and a5. And if I play rook a4 right away to block, the knight will move, attack my rook. Well, the queen will attack my rook, but I can play rook r8 to defend. That seems strange to me. I still need to check on rook. A 4, doesn't he have some weird knight moves? Not knight c5, because I would take his knight while defending my rook. Rook a4, knight d4. So he's attacking my rook. Yeah, knight d4. That's annoying because if I play rook a8, the knight can come to f5 afterwards, maybe attack my queen. Maybe it's not that annoying after all. I can play queen d8, and then I'll push his knight back with g6. I'd put mine on c5. So strangely enough, I think rook a4 is possible. It's very strange, but I feel like it's possible. But if he pushes to c5, though, that's the problem. Knight takes, and I can't take back, otherwise I lose my rook. So you see, on rook a4, he pushed c5. Well, I can take back with the pawn. After all, I still win a pawn when mem. If knight takes maintenance, I take back with the knight to defend my rook. On rook a4, c5, I take back with the pawn. It seems possible. Well, it's a bit risky to leave your pieces unprotected like that, but we'll see. Rook a4. En plus, the idea of playing rook a8, c'est pouvoir attaquer son pawn isolé on a 3. Pin it on this black square. So the idea is to play rook a8 and maybe later knight c5. If there's a capture, take back with the pawn and play. Knight 8, knight d6. But for that, my rook needs to be on a8 to defend the rook on a4. So right now I'm targeting his weaknesses. The isolated pawn on a3, which I want to double up attacks on, and the backward pawn on c4. And I'm also playing against the bishop on the white square, which doesn't have any offensive power, just defensive power. For now, it's defending e4. It could also come to e2, defense e4. It's an interesting game. Now, my opponent is taking some time. This is a big moment of reflection for him. Look, for the first time in the game, I think he's fallen behind me on time. And he plays knight to d4. We talked about this move. Knight d4. If I take his knight, he takes my rook. And here I had mentioned rook a8. So I'm going to play it. If he plays knight to f5, I'll play queen d8. And I'll push his knight back with g6. If he gives check, king g7. And his knight will be attacked. If he comes to b5, he'll attack c7. But there I had planned to play c5 with the queen defending c7. So now his knight is attacked, and I've managed to connect b2 to target his isolated pawn on a 3. And still the bad bishop on f3. You see, so I'm quite happy to have traded my white square bishop for his knight. Sure, I no longer have any white square bishops, but his is inactive. He only has one knight to try to dance around in my position, but I have 2 knights to counter him. Bishops aren't always superior to knights. It really depends on the position. So he plays king b5, attacking c7, so I play king c5. I've managed to get my knight to c5, which is what I wanted, and to double my rooks on the file, which is also what I wanted. So kb5 still has the advantage for him of defending the pawn on a 3. And the bishop and the queen together defend the pawn on e4, which I'm also attacking twice. So for now, he's still holding the defenses together. Meanwhile, I have a dog that's starting to bark a lot. Well, I hope you can't hear it. So rook b1 was played. But now I'm looking at the c6 push to attack his knight. If he takes, I recapture with the knight, and so it's pushed back. He doesn't have many squares. He can come to c3 to attack my rook, but then there will be rook takes on a 3 to win his pawn. But be careful, because he can exchange the rooks and then play a rook to b8. Check afterwards. So I think I won't rush to push his knight back with c6, and I'll play g6 first. All right, I'll play g6, giving up the dark square. And you see my pawn structure is solid on the white square, so the bishop can't come and bother my king here. And so that will prevent me from having a problem with my king if the b file opens up. So here, the idea is to play c6, pawn takes, knight to c3. He attacks my rook, rook takes a3, rook takes, rook recaptures. And you see on the rook b8 check, I have the square g7. So that's it. He plays knight c3. He played knight c3 without even waiting to be pushed back. And so here I can take the pawn on a 3. The knight c5 holds the pawn b7, so he has no counterattack on the file. So taking on a 3, I win his isolated pawn. So I put pressure back on his knight, and that was a good move. That can always be useful, but my rook is now unprotected. My queen isn't very well placed. I need to improve it. So he plays queen b2. He's attacking my rook. I can play rook b3 to exchange the rooks. I'm also looking at rook takes knight, queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes, knight recaptures. I attack his queen, but that seems insufficient to me. I'm going to play rook b3, exchanging the rooks. I don't need the rooks on the board. I have my extra pawn, and I want to play always against his bad bishop of white square. So he plays queen c2, and I exchange. Now the knight on c5, you can see the tremendous work it's doing. I did well to bring it to this square. It's putting pressure on the e4 pawn. It's defending b7 against any attack from the queen on the b file. Now, as we said, my queen needs to be improved. The problem is that as soon as I move it, maybe he'll want to play knight b5 to attack c7. I could try to play c6 to contest the square, but then I allow the queen to enter on b6. For now, I'll play h5. Why do that? Maybe at some point I'll play h4 to damage the defensive structure of his kingside castling. And then I'll play king g7, take my time, and see a bit how he organizes himself in the position as well. I'm not in a hurry. My advantage is lasting. I have one pawn up. His bishop is having trouble getting into play. I don't actually need to force things. So he plays h4. I'm going to play king g7. She's my queen. I don't really know how to improve her in the position. Perhaps queen d8 and queen a8. But still, this move, knight b5, is going to bother me. In addition, as soon as my queen is no longer on e7, playing c6 when his knight is on b5, it ensures him the capture of the d6 pawn. So you see, it's really not easy. That's the difficulty I'm going to have. Improving my queen and playing against his move, knight b5. So he plays queen c1. That's interesting because I could have knight b3 to attack his queen and place my knight on d4. Knight b3 and get to d4. The knight is going to gain a bit of height. It's going to gain a rank on the board. It was on the 5th rank. Now it's going to reach the 4th rank. And you know that the closer a knight gets to the center, the more capable it is of making forks. My dream after knight d4, c'est que s'il joue bishop e2, à un moment donné, son knight ne soit plus là pour faire la fork en e2 et attaquer le king et la queen. S'il joue un coup comme queen g5, je pourrais jouer k four de toute façon pour attaquer son bishop. He plays queen g5, by the way. And then maybe a move like knight g8 to protect my queen and offer the exchange of queens. Here, I'm not afraid of bishop takes pawn. Sure, my pawn can't take back because of the pin, but the knight could recapture. Although actually my knight can't recapture. You see, he's threatening bishop takes h5. Because the pawn on g6 is pinned because of the king, and the knight is pinned because of the queen. So if I play knight to d4, he plays bishop takes h5. So I have to play knight g8 right away. And then on bishop takes h5, I take his queen. And after that, I take his bishop. But if I play knight g8, he trades the queens. Queen takes, knight takes. And then he plays knight to b5 to attack the pawn on c7. And how do I defend? I don't know. If I play c6, I lose d6. So I could play knight to d4 to attack his bishop and attack his knight. If he takes, I take back with the pawn. But my pawn will still be exposed. But for now, I haven't seen anything better. My opponent offers a draw, but here, I'm not going to accept. No, I'm going to play the move. Knight g8. I propose exchanging the queens. I still have one pawn up. And I think I can solve the problem on c7. when he exchanges the queens and only plays b5. So I'll play knight to d4. He'll take, I take back. My pawn is certainly weak, but I could play c5 to protect it in square of en passant. I take back and I'll play c5 afterwards. So I think I can keep my extra pawn. And if he refuses to exchange the queens and moves back, then knight to d4. So he exchanges the queens, but here you see he's definitely going to play b5 against me. I also have a move like knight to d2, which is possible to attack e4 and c4. So he plays bishop to b3. And here, if I play knight to d2, I attack his pawns. He'll play knight to b5 to attack mine. Personally, I prefer to exchange the knights, so I'll go to d4. The piece that's troublesome for me is his knight, so if he comes to b5, I'll exchange right away. He doesn't come, so now I need to improve this knight. So how can I improve it? I think by knight to g8, knight to f6, knight to d7, knight c5. I'm going to put a knight back on c5. I'm going to put the knight on d4 and the knight on c5. So he plays f4. If I play knight f6, then he takes a move that I take back. Maybe he'll play c5 afterwards. That f4 push bothers me a bit. All right, I'll play f6. So I know I'm taking my knight square, but maybe he'll start taking. And I'll take back and free up the knight again. So king to e3. Now how do I get my knight to reach the c5 square? Knight e7, knight c8, knight b6, knight d7, knight c5. Let's go. It's a bit long, but does he even have any responses against my side? Here, I'm going to play kb6. I control the square d7, so he can't get in. But I'm threatening that there are ideas. 4 checks, that's the good news. So I'm attacking his pawn and his bishop. He's still blocking me from square d7. If I play bishop b5, what do I play if I take the knight takes back, attacks c7, but c4? So there, he played king d3. He lets me take his bishop. I didn't want to take it, but I'm going to take it because his knight on a4 doesn't scare me here. I can even maybe play b6, but he'll come back to c3 to go to b5. There, he'll want to support the c5 push anyway. Or maybe I'll play the move b6 to prevent him from making that push. And my king, I need to improve it now. So I have an extra pawn, but I need to improve my king. I'm bringing my king up a bit. Now, she's offering to exchange pieces. So I accept, but as a result, my pawn will be backward. It'll be hard to play. Maybe play f5. I play f5. I give the f6 square to my king. I still have one more pawn, but my extra pawn is on c7. It's hard to make it valuable. I think, unfortunately, the position is going to become draw. No, in my opinion, he shouldn't have taken, because now he takes, and he's going to leave me 4 pawns against 3 in this area. So here, he made a mistake, and on top of that, recapturing with my pawn opens a path for my king to get in. So here, he made a big mistake in the endgame. So I'm simply going to head towards c5 to take his b5. If he takes, I recapture with the pawn from g to f5, and I have no problem. And if I bring my king to c5 and he brings his king to actually prevent me from getting in, I'll have the capture on e4 or the push on f4. And here, he's going to lose on time. No, he resigns. So As you can see, the computer gives me 94% accuracy versus 84% for my opponent, but I made a mistake. A mistake that could have cost me the win, because if my opponent had taken advantage of it, the game would have ended in a draw. So first, this position, I played the move to b6, but that really compromises a lot of my chances to win. It worsens my evaluation. Look, for now, I have an advantage according to the computer if you look at the evaluation bar on the right. But by playing b6, my advantage is reduced. I should have played king f7 to always maintain a good advantage. I played b6, he played the Kali to c3, I brought my king to f7, he played the Kali to b5, I took on b5, he recaptured. Now, my advantage isn't huge, and here the computer shows that I should have taken on f4. And then I was looking for the g5 push with the king infiltrating. That's not what I did, I played f5. And here, it's always easy to say in analysis, but my opponent is going to make a mistake. But in the end games, we have little time, and it's difficult not to make a mistake. And in reality, there is only one move here for white to manage to make a draw. You see here the evaluation bar, it shows equality. But to achieve this equality, you have to find the right move for white. Otherwise, it collapses immediately. So, what is the right move for white? I invite you to pause the video to take your time and look for it. So my opponent, he took on e5. And that's losing. He should have taken on f5. So the correct line, according to the computer, is to take on f5. So I take back. And then above all, not to touch the position. To play king e3, or to play king e2, or to play king d2. But above all, not to touch the position. It's the capture on e5 that's actually losing for him. And see how, all of a sudden, the evaluation bar swings in my favor. Because now I can recapture, and I have this path of penetration for my king, plus this majority of 4 pawns against 3, which can allow me to create a passed pawn. In the game, my opponent plays king e3, I played king e7, and you see I'm going to direct my king. And if he tries to oppose with his own king, I could capture on e4 or push to f4 to create a passed pawn. Pawn takes, and I have the passed pawn. His king won't be able to both stop the creation of a passed pawn and prevent the infiltration of my king at the same time. So in the game, for white, the right move was to capture on f5 and wait by moving the king. And above all, not to capture on e5. And if my opponent had simply held the position with king e3, I could capture on e4. And here again, it's winning for me. He can recapture with his king's f6, and if he takes on e5, I recapture and will have that passed pawn. And if he doesn't take, he'll be forced to retreat. But retreating will allow my king to infiltrate. For example, if he plays king f3, I play king f5. If he waits on e3, I take on f4, he can recapture, but then I slip into g4 to attack the pawn on h4. And unfortunately, in this position, he couldn't go to g3. So either he takes and gives me the passed pawn, or even my king can recapture to go win the pawn on e4, or he moves his king. But to avoid losing the pawn on f4, he has to move the king to e3. And then I take nf4 on discovered check, and afterwards I infiltrate to win the pawn h4 and have the passed pawn. And that's decisive. It was a very interesting game with a high-quality player. It was a long positional battle with a lot of knights maneuvers, as you could see. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave me likes, comments, and share it. We'll meet again soon for new adventures on the chessboard. Goodbye, everyone.